And welcome. This is Dr. Jason Dean, Brave TV, your source for health, freedom, and knowledge. A special guest back with me today. It's been too long, and I saw her face popping up all over out there. Dr. Anna is back with us today, and I keep trying to do her last name, but I don't want to do it injustice. So I'm going to allow her to keep saying it over and over again. So everybody, because I hear your interviews out there and I hear them like totally mess it up. I'm like, I'm not going to be the person that messes it up. She's going to say it herself. But first of all, Dr. Anna, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me back. And the name is Mihalcea.
Mihalcea. I have it down. I just don't want to screw it up when I say it. That's all. It's such a great name. We want to make sure it's well recognized. But you were here one at a time. People loved having you here. Before we dive into kind of the updated material, because you are constantly researching this, which is what I love. Give everyone again a summary, kind of, or a snapshot of who you are and how you ended up in this world.
Yes, so I'm actually a traditionally trained internal medicine physician, and I went into anti-aging medicine. And at the start of the pandemic, I treated people with, methods like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. And then one day, Dr. David Nixon had asked me if I wanted to take a look at the Pfizer vials, and we've found self-assembling nanotechnology, and that's where everything changed for me because I endeavored to understand what is really in the blood, and then what are people worldwide seeing. I got a dark field microscope, and then I started seeing it in the unvaccinated. I started documenting the phenomenon of shedding and really explaining to people, it's like, look, all of humanity is under attack. These were self-spreading biological weapons. And then once I was researching all of these things, I became a research partner with Clifford Carnicom because he had investigated Morgellons for over 30 years, which was this geoengineered polymer filament that was used for, DNA, literally. It was a biosensor, and it was self-assembling advanced nanotechnology. And so him and we did a lot of experiments on the rubbery clots, and we found that it was polymer plastics. And we did experiments on the blood conductivity and showed that the stuff hijacks electricity, just like the intra-body area network literature is talking about, the technological literature. And so a lot of the puzzles came together, and so I started researching more and more in the field of nanotechnology, synthetic biology. What is really the long-term goal of these technocratic, satanic transhumanists? And to me, it all made sense. So I've been trying to explain it to the people who think I was a nutcake.
Well, it's funny. So it's not funny because this is a deep subject, and I'll tell you, I've talked to other people as well who are studying this from different angles, obviously, and it's interesting because it's catching some attention, but it's still not nearly the expose it needs to be. And a lot of people we think are kind of either afraid of it or just not really ready to confront it yet because the idea this is in them, whether they took vaccines or it's not, because it's in the food supply, it's in the air. They put this stuff in many, many different places, medical devices, medications, etc. Almost like people are a little bit afraid to dive into this world. And the wonderful folks like you, other doctors, myself, who are actually talking about it, it's not the attention I want yet where it should be. But on top of that, and I'm curious your kind of opinion on this. When the COVID vaccines first came out, we were all saying, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. There's no way this is going to be good. And the medical world didn't see it. They said, go ahead. This is a dangerous virus, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But then like 2021, 2022 hits. And there's medical doctors who even claim that they're kind of a little bit natural. They claimed that there was no nanotechnology in this. Now, I'm not going to name names. I'm sure people will pick up on the names that are out there. I'm not going to throw them under the bus. I don't need any legal issues on my end, right? Dr. Anna, why would they claim there's no nano when all it took was you to dive in, live blood, doing the technologies you're doing. Why were you able to find it, and maybe a few others, and they totally miss it?
Well, the funny thing is, if that particular interview that was on TV, I saw it on the screen while they were looking at it. This is with Del Victory, and so I think I don't know. I cannot speculate. What I'm endeavoring to do, it's like, look, I believe that humanity is under assault, and that there's something that we can do because I studied polymer chemistry. Now I understand how is this technology activated, how do metals relate to it, how do we have to pull this out. And what I learned from actually looking at the blood of a deceased individual, somebody who Richard Hirschman had sent me the blood of an individual who was dead already for 8 months, and I saw this technology continue to evolve. And that's really where my findings jump started, because all of a sudden I knew how to look for it, because this stuff is so
They
small.
were dead for 8 months and it was still moving.
It was self-assembling,
It was
absolutely.
self-assembly, okay.
Yes, and so it was continuing to replicate even though the host was dead already. And this is consistent with, like the newest findings, my work with Dr. Justin Coy, who found this strange glow in people, and then not just the glow, because people were dismissing that, oh, that's just propionic bacteria in your comedones. It's like, no, 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 people. This happened like 2 weeks after people got the shots, and there was this orange glow that went all over their
Yeah.
forehead. And actually, not only that, but there were fluorescent filaments coming out of their skin that I analyzed under the microscope. So what I'm trying to say is that here is this technology, and there is so much to research about it. But what I've noticed really is that there is a field of scientific literature that absolutely acknowledges it, but they call it microplastics, and it's everywhere. It's in Consumer Report. They're saying, it's in the food supply, 250,000 nanoparticles of this stuff in every bottled water, absolutely everywhere. And so this is the other aspect of what I've been endeavoring to connect the dots to people. It's like, look, what I call self-assembling nanotechnology, they call this microplastic stuff.
That's very fascinating. So the mic how long do you think they've been playing with the microplastics itself?
So they're in the literature, they're talking about the microplastics, that it's part of, we've been using too much plastic, and so it's degrading, and therefore now it's everywhere.
Oh,
But
wow.
that's really absolute lie, because I can show the chemical signatures of the polymers that have been sprayed via geoengineering warfare and weather modification operations, because people have analyzed this stuff. So the DEHP, which is a type of a plasticizer called phthalates, that same stuff is now found in the human placenta, in the physical body, and in the food supply. And if all the chemical signatures are the same, somebody has to ask, well, wait a minute, if we're spraying 40 million tons of this stuff annually to modify the weather, then maybe the plant life and the biosphere is going to be infected with it everywhere, and all the food that we're eating is going to have it, and all the animals that are grazing out on the pasture. And so that it is literally, going into the entire biospheric life cycle. And I can show you the ticket of the chemical analysis of every step, and that's clearly the case. So again, the reason why I write so many Substack articles, people complain about 2 to 3 emails sometimes a day, is just because is because people just do not put the dots together. So I'm endeavoring to explain what I see. Is like, here's the puzzle piece. This is how this belongs together, and then how does it relate to this transhumanist agenda, just 5G, 6G, the metaverse, and all of this technocratic stuff. This is actually very, very interesting. A hopeful thing, that article just now, is because these phthalates, these plastics, they were, like I said, found in all bottled water. And this was a study that showed that hard water, if you boil it for 5 minutes, the plastic precipitates with calcium, and it self-assembles large enough to where a regular water filter can take it out. And they were able to pull out 90% of these plastics. Very, very important research,
Wow.
because if we're endeavoring to protect ourselves from this stuff, we have to know about the ways to detoxify them. So, yes, those are some of the things, that I'm discussing. And what is the literature that's describing it? It's not the medical literature. That's the Chemical Society journal, for example, or you get it in Nature Nanotechnology, or so these are scientific articles that regular doctors aren't reading. And this is really where we need to broaden our minds. And it could potentially be a reason for your initial question regarding, why did they just say no nano, is because a doctor doesn't know about nanotechnology. Even though 50% of healthcare is affected by it and is being used by it, they're not learning it in medical school. It's not in the regular medical literature. So what you don't know about, you can't see.
Yeah, it's quite amazing. Well, isn't that the problem though with, I mean, not just medical, it's health, it's in general. You know, and I know you're like this. You're studying your world, but you're also crossing into other worlds that are similar to yours to study as well, so you know what's going on. But unfortunately, we have this paradigm in America, even in healthcare, medical doctors, etc., where they stay in that lane and they don't look anywhere outside of there. So if it's not within that scope, they totally miss it. But missing it has become life and death in this situation.
Yes, absolutely. And so this idea that, you're never done learning. And one of the aspects of, like we've studied so long to have the letters behind our names, right? And it's sort of like, well, you're kind of done. No, you're not. You're just starting. And you have to have the courage to maybe go into this, another area of let's say technology, et cetera, and start over, be a complete novice. I didn't know what I was doing when I got my dark field microscopy, and now I'm like this expert. How did I learn it? I just kept
Just
looking at it.
kept going, didn't you?
That's right.
So, I mean, that's a big game changer to look at, because you're looking at live blood, correct?
Yes, I'm looking at live blood, and things have changed over time, because what I realized is that the little tiny building blocks of what is creating what's behind me there, those long filaments that can be 1,000 times larger than red blood cells, those are really nano to micro robots. And what's interesting is because they're fluorescent and they're blinking, they appear larger than what they really are. So, I think this is sort of part of the discovery journey, that the little tiny things that we thought, oh, these are little chylomicrons or little fats. Oh no, that's a robot actually, and it changes colors from blue to red to green to yellow, and that's how you know this is an electronic device.
That's crazy. And I can't call you crazy because I've also seen it in other pictures as well. So I know it's not. You have some stuff you want to show us though, correct?
Yes, absolutely. So let me share my screen here 1 second. So what I wanted to talk about today is this most recent aspect of self-assembling nanoparticles and the microplastics, because this came out. This was just published, And this is very important for the survival of the human race because microplastics were found in every human placenta tested. And these filaments that they found is exactly the stuff that I see in people's blood everywhere. And so what they were saying was that, initially in 2020, for the first time, they found in these human placentas these microplastics. And then this new study went back all the way to 2006 up to 2021 and found an ever increasing amount up to 685 micrograms per gram of tissue. This is an outrageous amount if you understand that we're talking about toxic plastics. And the reason why this is so important, and I very carefully look at it, is that not only does it microscopically look exactly as what we've seen, for example, in the COVID shots and what we've seen in the rainwater sprayed via geoengineering, these self-assembling polymers, or what we've seen in the food supply. When I looked, for example, at meat samples, organic as well as non-organic meat, it has it in it. So they looked at what exactly were the chemicals, and the signature of these polymers are plastic, meaning polystyrene, polyethylene, and polyethylene is part of what's being used right now in the shots as this lipid nanoparticle technology. So if you see here, polyethylene again, that is a plastic, but it's also what's been used for these Morgellons filaments. Polyvinyl chloride is plastic, and that is what Clifford Carnicom and I found the signatures in the blood, not just in vax, but unvaccinated, as well as in the clots, same as nylon. So we found polyamide proteins, and polyamides is nylon, for example. And then you have these other, crazy things like these terephtalates. So these are plasticizers that make, for example, polyvinyl alcohol softer. Polyurethane, polypropylene, polystyrene, which is styrofoam. So let me just, back off here and say, yes, there's styrofoam in people's placentas and plastic and all of these toxic chemicals. And so,
Would that be now you're nailing it, but I want I want to play like skeptic, even though I'm not being a skeptic. Is there a chance, one, this has been in other vaccines before and just kind of part of the process? Could it be accidentally in there just based on contamination or part of the process? Or does this have to be directly put in at these levels? Does that make sense?
yes, yes, I will answer this. Unfortunately, we can't get the sound to go, but here's Fauci talking about self-assembling nanoparticle. But
Yes.
here's your question. This is a United States patent, Moderna, that says lipid nanoparticle compositions and methods of formulating the same, okay? And they have a section in there that is talking about stealth nanoparticles. And
Yes.
what are they made of? Polyethylene, check it out, here's a match. Polyvinyl alcohol is right here, which is polyvinyl chloride, okay? Nylon is polyamides, they're over here. You see this acrylonitriles things, those are also part of this. Polyurethane down here. These polymetacrylates, that's super glue.
Okay.
There's
Well, that's not
there's
good.
yeah, there's super glue in the shots. Is this one polycyanoacrylate, a super glue? So you can see here that literally all of these plastics are mentioned as stealth nanoparticles in the shots, and that can also explain why, for example, there was a drastic increase in the amounts, particularly 2020, 2021. So but also, for example, here, this was the near-infrared spectroscopy of the vaccinated and unvaccinated blood, and we found in the blood the signature of polyamide. So this is nylon, polyvinyl alcohol, that's plastic. even silicone, which is used to make biosensors. And so you can see polyenes and alkenes. Polyenes is polyethylene. Polyethylene glycol is a polyene. So you can see that there are matches. And then I was given an analysis, which is anonymous, but by Todd Callender, the attorney,
Yes. Yep.
and they did a liquid gas chromatography, and they found 146 molecules related to plastics in a Pfizer vial. In particular, you can see here phthalates, which is that the same plasticizers that soften polyvinyl alcohol, and they're all endocrine disruptors, meaning that they cause significant damage to the human body by literally messing with the hormones. And you see all of these derivatives of phthalates were in these vials. And I have been since calling, to get a forensic analysis for this liquid gas chromatography done. This is a study that was done on the Morgellons filaments way back when. It was a private study. It was published by Harald Kautzweiler, and here he shows that there's this high-density polyethylene fiber, and it is used in manufacturing fiber optics. This is exactly what our nanotechnology colleagues told us when we found the microchips with these fiber optic cables developing from the Pfizer vials. And you can see also, silica and silicone, which is exactly what we found in the blood. And what was it even then? It was said, look, this is used in bionanotechnology to encapsulate viral protein envelopes. It's a delivery system. Here, this is also very interesting. This was a publication that looked at microplastic in people who underwent heart surgery. And so they did samples from they did biopsies from the myocardium, the pericardium, and the adipose tissue, and the blood. And they found all of these different plastics. And they said, okay, 9 types of microplastics were detected, and they were launched within the tissue. And the presence of polymethyl methacrylate in the heart, they said they could not explain by anything. Like, people are saying, oh, there's plastic tubing in the surgery, etc. So they clearly said, no, this wasn't just from the surgery. And they clearly mentioned they found these plastics everywhere, in the oral cavity, in the uterine cavity, in the vaginal cavity, everywhere. Here again, you can see, all of these different areas where this was present. And what is so important about this is that these plastics are extremely toxic to the myocardium. In fact, there was a study done that I had also just posted, where they looked at blood that was donated, and this blood contained DHEP, which is a phthalate. And they checked how toxic this stuff was to mice, and the mice within 30 minutes developed heart arrhythmia, and in other studies, cardiac arrest. So we have these people who are dying suddenly, and we have these plastics in there, and everybody's saying, oh, it's just a spike protein. And I'll get to that a little bit. But what I want to show here, these are these filaments from Morgellons in another evaluation from Harvard University. And you see here terephthalic acid. It's the same molecule with carbon nanotube, which is graphene oxide. Remember, they found graphene oxide in the vials, and
Yes.
it's also known that it's clearly part of the manufacturing process. And then you can see they have other proteins and chemicals, like methotrexate is actually a chemotherapeutic agent, and metals that are part of this. But again, what I've been saying all along is that there is a correlation here, that this is a continuation of the human experimentation that they did via geoengineering. This is another thing that I want to explain to people, because they're talking about a virus and the spike protein. So we did not find mRNA in the vials. For example, Dr. Janina Hagema from Romania didn't find phosphorus and nitrogen. Dr. Daniel Nagaz didn't find it. Steve Kirsch didn't find it. So wait a minute, if there's no mRNA, what is making people sick? And it turns out, here's the NIH director's blog, okay?
Hmm.
And it's talking about speeding up COVID drug discovery with quantum dots. Quantum dots is a technology that we found in the blood. I call them micro robots. And what it's saying here is that these multicolor orbs that might resemble the virus are lab-made nanocrystals called quantum dots. They have been around since the 1980s, and they have special optical properties that allow them to be fluorescent. So this is one of the things that we found, fluorescent glow of the skin. And we found that SV 40, or I researched that SV40 has been used to actually for genetic modification in animals to insert luciferase into the genetic material of these animals and make them glow. So here's the same quantum dot, and they glow. And so they have metals inside of them, and they can put a protein that looks like a spike protein that's studded in there, and so it's way cheaper. So this thing will give people an antibody response as if there was a virus, but there never was. And same thing would be true for, um, uh, if people were looking, for example, for antibodies in tissues for spike protein, well, they could find this stuff if there was no mRNA in the files.
It sounds like they're also building a system within the body for future drug delivery.
Absolutely. And here, this is an article that Karen Kingston has shown, because if you see his SARS-CoV spike protein is vulnerable to moderate electric fields. Wait a minute, a protein shouldn't be responding to electrical field, but it changes configuration, and she's clearly shown that this thing, the pictures that they have are always showing as the virus, well, that's a quantum dot with these proteins, and it turns out that it starts to self-assemble when you have electrical fields that you're exposing it to, which is why people have to be so careful with TENS units and even magnetic fields, because this stuff grows into a filamental structure. And Karen Kingston also found this patent, which, by the way, is vaccine nanotechnology. It's a government-owned patent, and that says that in some embodiments, the molecule is a toxin, and it's from a chemical weapon, an agent of biowarfare, or a hazardous and environmental agent. So I think it's very important for people to understand. I'm part of this group, the National American Renaissance Movement. I'm a board member there, and we're fighting these biological and technological weapons of mass destruction. This was this study that I showed you, where you can actually drink boil water and get these nanoparticles out of the tap water, and up to 90% of it, because it's in bottled water. And you can see here, if you're heating it up, you can see the assembly process, and they become much, much larger as they're binding to calcium, and then they can actually be filtered out. So that would be one way that people can help themselves to get this stuff out. So this is just a little bit about just the most recent articles that I have posted. I think I'm almost at 600 articles now on this topic.
Yeah.
So
Your day job is to actually work with people. Night job is to just type all the time, right?
yeah, and anyways, the point is just to kind of explain how it all interacts, and that there is this broader plan to create cyborgs out of people, because when you are inserting, for example, nanobots in a human, that makes you a cyborg, or foreign DNA, or you modify our DNA, you can modify it with electrical and electromagnetic fields. And so it's important for people to understand this technology. And I'm only talking about one small aspect of it, but if you allow me, I want to talk a little bit about solutions that I
Yeah,
have
absolutely.
found and why I found them. So I also looked into the patents, and in the patent of the Moderna shots, there's an aspect that says how to inhibit nanoparticle assembly. And what are they saying? Well, it turns out that these polymers that I showed you, this polyurethane, polyvinyl, etc., is like a Lego building block, but it has to have a catalyst to start the reaction to put the chain together. So this thing behind me, that started like all of these little tiny dots, and they assembled together to create this big filament. So I actually studied polymer chemistry, and I said, well, how does this stuff work? So how do plastics assemble?
Right.
It turns out that metals are needed to assemble something like polyethylene or polyethylene glycol. And it turns out that they
A metal is needed?
a metal, yes. So they use a transition metal like yttrium, or there's titanium and other metals that, by the way, have been found by Antoinetta Gatti in every childhood vaccine. So undisclosed metals. It's not just mercury
Oh,
and
wow.
yes, so they found steel, etc. But we were very much wondering, like, why yttrium, why cesium, why all of these exotic metals? Well, it turns out that if you combine something like yttrium with aluminum, that creates a catalytic reaction that is the start signal for the polymer to start growing. Okay.
Mm.
And it turns out if you want to encode the stop signal, in the patents it says use EDTA chelator combined with vitamin C or another antioxidant like vitamin E or malic acid, which is made from apples. Well, I was like all excited about that because I'm a certified chelation practitioner and I've been using EDTA for a long time. And it helps to clear, not just for heavy metal toxicity, but it also helps for reversal of arteriosclerosis. So I was using it in my patients, and I saw people with heavily contaminated blood, and I would give them IV infusions with EDTA chelation and glutathione, and the next day vitamin C, and the next day again chelation. And 3 days later, they went from completely contaminated to having clean blood and feeling much, much better. Their heart palpitation went away, their brain fog improved, their energy all of a sudden got better because the EDTA is also an electron donor. So it regenerates the red blood cells that were all clumping together. And so that made perfect sense to me. And and it was definitely verified in the patent. The other molecule that I found very useful, I found because I was looking at all of these different pharmaceutical injectables, like insulin. It's filled
Hmm.
with hydrogel, polysorbate
Yes.
80, and the same filaments were developing in insulin. And then I looked at all of these childhood vaccines, like the MMR, the meningitis, pneumovax, all of them have the same stuff. And methylene blue, actually, the way I figured that out is I was doing these experiments of just drawing my patient's blood, because we found that in the vaccinated, if you draw the blood and you let 30 milliliters of blood sit for 4 hours, there was this rubbery material that was developing. And we analyzed it. It was exactly the same stuff that the cadavers were having, the rubbery wax clots that Richard Hirschman and other embalmers have been showing. So it turns out that polymers, when you cool them down, they start to assemble. Sometimes, that can happen. So all of a sudden you have this rubbery material there. And then I tried different things on how could I prevent the assembly. So I inserted some EDTA into a syringe that inhibited it. Vitamin C inhibited it. And then I tried methylene blue. It also inhibited it. And then I use methylene blue because it's an electron donor. It helps with brain fog. It has anti-aging properties, and it increases the oxygen delivery in cells between 30 to 70%. So then instead of just putting it into the blood, I gave the patient the methylene blue, told them, take this, and come back and we redo the test. So a few weeks later, they came back and no rubbery clot development when we drew the blood. So this is when I really started saying, okay, wait a minute, there's something to it. And then I had a case that was very interesting because I learned from people, because people come to me because they've been everywhere else and they nothing made sense and they're still having problems. So there was this gentleman who came to me who had he was unvaxxed but had blood clots in both legs, and then he was put on Eliquis with aspirin, which is the standard protocol, right? And on this protocol, a little afterwards, he would develop bilateral pulmonary emboli. And the man almost died because the blood clots went up into his lungs. And so then by the time he came to me, he was still pretty debilitated, and he was on nattokinase, seraptase, lumbrokinase, Eliquis, and aspirin, 5 different things. And we did the test of just drawing his blood, and in 4 hours, his blood turned to rubber. And he was obviously like, oh my God. So then we did the testing, and I put him on EDTA, and the methylene blue is what finally did it, because when he went back home, his doctor, he kept doing the testing, and it was what absolutely prevented the rubbery clot from happening. So it was just interesting in this clinical setting to understand all of these different things in somebody who's been so symptomatic, who almost died from this, and then finally finding something that actually worked. So this is why I've been so adamant. I mean, people have like I said, said, oh my God, she's trying to poison people with EDTA, or methyl blue is bad for you, or whatever. It's like, look, people, I'm a doctor and a clinician. I run a busy practice, and I see the most complicated of people in regards to shedding and brain fog, and people with turbo cancer who are unvaxxed because their spouse got vaxxed. And there's vaccine injury in the unvaccinated now. And I've tried everything. And this is why I come up with these things, because ultimately this is what's been helpful. The other thing that I want to tell people about is I ran across the literature and the work of Dr. Hildegard Stanninger. She, for 30 years, treated Morgellons, and she also, analyzed these microchips in people who were targeted individuals, etc. And she figured out that essential oils dissolve plastics, including, for
Oh,
example, if you take drops of lemon, grapefruit oil, and cinnamon, and you put it into a styrofoam cup, it dissolves it in 11 minutes. So yes, and it's like, hey, I'm open-minded, whatever works. So I've been incorporating into my protocol. People get these little capsules, and they do 2 drops of each of these oils, 2 drops of cinnamon, 2 drops of lemon, 2 drops of grapefruit. In her paper, it also talked about thieves, but thieves burns the holy heck out of you. So you have to be careful, because you don't want to injure the mucosa, because
right.
you want to swallow these things, because the microplastics enter through your gut. and it attacks the microbiome. And so many people have been having issues with bloating and gut issues and things like that. So I recommend sauerkraut and definitely these essential oils, and that's been helpful. And then lastly, things like activated charcoal actually work. They've been used for brain fog from microwave poisoning, for example. So we have all of these things, including, vitamin C and antioxidants, etc., that are able to help us, but we need to acknowledge that this stuff is present and use the right things to endeavor to get these plastics out, because you can see the technological literature is clearly saying it's finding it, and the toxicity is extreme.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I came across Nano and Morgellons back in probably around 2010, just through some various alternative sites that I was studying and looking at. And I wasn't studying deep, but just studying a little bit. And I was also studying global order, the world order, right, at that time. And the big fear was they're going to chip everybody. They're going to chip everybody. So everyone's looking for the chip, right? And by 2020, we're like looking for the chip. Little did I know that all this nanotechnology that I was actually looking at was what they're really using. And they've been using this for, this isn't just a 2021 COVID bioweapon. They've been building this up for a long period of time. This research goes back deep. They know how to build computers into people, correct?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's important, to kind of really, really understand. And just one second, I want to show just a couple images, because what people are saying that, the microchip thing, well, it doesn't look like a microchip chip, it's a biosensor. And this biosensor you would find um, just in the blood. Hold on, 1 second. I can show you this right here. One moment. I'm going to share my screen here real quick.
No worries.
All right. Self-assembly. Okay. So this was. Can you see my screen?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. So if you see here, this was the embalmed blood that I told you about of somebody who had died with the clots, and you see the same filaments that we were seeing. And this was this self-assembling area. And if I just speed this up, you see these round little things, and they have these blinking lights in them. The blinking lights are bio nano sensors. And so first of all, this is a video over now 7 minutes, and you see how fast this assembles. But then let me go to the next slide, because this video here is 4,000 times magnification. And so you see, this is a red blood cells, which is 5 to 7 microns. And you see these little tiny dots. I mean, they're like 500 nanometers or something like that. Okay. And you can see how they're blinking, they're moving and
Yeah.
blinking in different colors. All right. And that's your microchip. You don't need more. That is right there, a biosensor. And then this right here is an unvaccinated individual who has the same thing from shedding. And you see the electromagnetic frequency has basically destroyed or put the red blood cells in total distress. But these little bubbles in this sphere is exactly the same thing. And what I've shown is that this stuff will actually assemble and literally assemble these filaments. So this right here is also you can see these are all biosensors. These are micro robots. You can see how they're
Yeah, you can see
blinking
them all
and
moving.
moving and in different colors, and they hijack the electricity from the red blood cells until the only thing that's left is a graveyard. It's literally they're forming the rubbery clot. But this thing has a semiconducting metal inside of them. It is surrounded by a polymer, same polymer plastic that I showed you. And this thing can send a signal to the cloud with all of your biometric data, as well as it can be externally modified. And you see, I always say nothing in the body is supposed to blink blue, red, orange, and green. Okay, this is not normal. And so if I show you here, this right here is a robot that I found in budesonide. And you can see it's built from this round stuff, and it actually absolutely moves. I don't have the video here, but you can still see. So these things are at a very minute scale, but they grow very large. That is the whole aspect of dual purpose of nanotechnology. Is this field is not regulated, and it's been used for warfare applications. So if you have unrestricted self-assembly, you can kill stuff. You can kill people. You don't need an atomic bomb. The bomb is at a nanoscale.
It's literally the inverse of it. So you're right. They don't have to take out populations via wars and nuclear bombs. They can literally shut you off, because if they have you electrical, I mean, we're already electrical bodies, but if they add that into the cell, which is what they're doing, they can do that from frequencies from a distance. They have access to your cell. They can hack your cells literally at that point, which is I know it's true because I've been studying for a long time, but it still sounds sci-fi crazy. Yet that's what they depend on, Dr. Anna, is for people to think, oh my God, this is too sci-fi. This can't be true. They depend on that so people won't look at it.
Yes, absolutely. And what Klaus Schwab said, he said, the fourth industrial revolution will change people without them knowing it. And literally, this stuff does, because ultimately it can be used for mind control and mind program. If they change, this technology operates at the quantum level, and the spin state of particles determines their information. Well, imagine they change the spin state in the synaptic cleft in a neuron. That means they change your thought, and you would not know that it wasn't your thought. So this stuff is very, very dangerous. And if you look at the military literature, which is another field I really started diving into, and I said, it says right there, we will make the technology and the cyborgization of humanity palatable through the healthcare system by telling them, oh, if we put a pacemaker in you, and then the biotic arm, and then the brain chip so the paraplegic can move, then we can accept that we are all gonna get chipped at some point, which is just nonsense, you know. So you know, this is a complete change of what it means to be divinely human.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever seen the Rand Corporation has they literally talk about Internet of Bodies and what you just said, which is they showed the different things, and I can actually bring it up right now, which is I saw this probably some years ago. So they actually go through and they show an artificial pancreas, attention monitors, body implanted sensors, brain computer interfaces, clothing with sensors, freestanding infusion pumps, implantable cardiac devices, ingestible digital pills, sensor equipped hospital beds, wearable health trackers, wearable neuro devices. That's just a sampling, and that's the Rand Corporation. So they're, they're not playing around. They're just, I mean, that's essentially a government contracted industry right there.
Absolutely, and it's ultimately used for military purposes to create cyborg soldiers and you know, to really completely change what it is to human and the future of warfare. If you look at the document of the military Cyborg Soldier 2050 and what they're describing there, from bionic eyes that can see in infrared to, you know, having skin that is, you know, bulletproof with things like spider silk, which, by the way, you know, I've done a lot of research on there too, and they've been spraying that stuff on us. So the whole idea of modifying everything. But I also like to talk about the spiritual aspect, because if you haven't noticed yet that we're in Armageddon, you're missing something. And literally the idea, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual, and
Yes.
the idea of, taking the creation of God, and literally they want to alter every cell on the planet, every microbe, and digitize it so that nothing is left that is organic and that's natural. And they want to create, these human machine interface, but they want to actually, Ray Kurzweil says, the plan is to phase out the human so that the only thing that's left is machine. And now that we have artificial intelligence and the fusion of general AI with quantum technology and quantum computing, all of these processes are automated. Humans have no control over it. So we're entering a territory that is literally, a point of no return, and people need to wake up if they still can, if their brain is still their own, uh, and fight this with everything you got. I mean, I'm serious. Sometimes people are saying, "Oh, I'll lose my job, I lose my medical license." I'm like, we're losing the future of humanity, people.
Yeah, this is planetary. Why? Well, it's interesting. So, like, I want to go real quick back to something you said, because this seems fascinating, but not in a good way. So one of the things I personally work on in practice is I end up seeing a lot of children and a lot of kids who are on spectrum, whether just minor on the spectrum or full blown autism spectrum. And you talked about some of these other metals in besides just aluminum. Well, the childhood schedule went from a couple when I was born to 74 plus. I'm probably speculating here, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but is it possible they've been putting these metals in from a nano particular side, or these fillers, or whatever word you want to use, over time to slowly get us in this direction? Is that possibly what that finding is?
Yes, absolutely. And the whole point is that, so Mark Steele, the weapons expert, he explained that the metals are not, just accidental, but that they are a part of the radar facial reconnaissance system that makes, biometric interrogation much more easier. And so Antonetta Gatti's um, uh, research article of 44 childhood vaccines that showed nanoparticulate, I mean, steel, tungsten, iron, aluminum, silver, titanium, all of these different metals.
Yeah, those aren't accidental. There's no
They're,
way.
they're not accidental, but they also, so number one, all metal toxicity increases the smaller the metal is. So
Yes.
when you have a nanoparticulate, it can be 10,000 times more poisonous than a microparticulate. And then on the other hand, also they bioaccumulate. So if you have aluminum
Correct.
and titanium and steel, they all have their joint toxicity is way more than what it would be if you just had one specific metal poisoning in the body. So I've seen, again, as a chelation practitioner, I do heavy metal testing. So we give the chelation, and then we check the urine, and the amount of stuff that's coming out of people. And I've shown, for example, in consecutive testing, that they were spraying uranium. Somebody who started chelation didn't have uranium in their body, did 20 chelation once a week, and then we repeated the metals test, and the uranium is off the charts. Well, uranium isn't something that's just like floating around, and when it all of a sudden turns up in this population, what does that have to do, radioactive isotope, with turbo cancers? And is there an activation there with the radiation that we're getting through, 5G and EMF, and then these antennas? And then lastly, Dr. Peter Garayev was a Russian scientist who really had a whole different idea about DNA, and that it's a holographic light and sound information encoded structure. And I studied it for my book Light Medicine, because metals have they scramble light. And so, and for example, Fritz Alexander Popp in Germany showed that when you have a carcinogen, it's a light scrambler because the cell can repair itself at 360 nanometers in the UV light spectrum. And when it can no longer do that because you have so much metal contamination that the light emission is literally completely hijacked, then you get cancers and other diseases. So on a biophotonic level, the metals are hugely toxic for the entire genome, and they're part of gene editing, actually.
Brilliant work, ma'am. Brilliant work.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And, it's always a pleasure to talk to somebody who is open minded enough to be willing to discuss these things because, only when we put ourselves out there, under the ridicule of colleagues and all that, who say, again, we're just nut jobs and conspiracy theorists, but it's like, this is a new science, and
Yes.
people need to relearn all of their thinking. But once you look at all of the pieces of the puzzles, it does make sense. It has for me.
How young were you when you first woke up? You
I
seem like one of those ones that was a child. You just knew.
I don't know. I think, what happened was, I was in the healthcare system, and I, I started having a real problem with being secretly telling my patients about, cancer, alternative cancer treatments. And then I never wanted to give flu shots, but my nurses would give them in my name, and they rolled out pay for performance, and I was a medical director. And at some point, I could just not live with myself, and I quit everything. I quit it all, and I just said I'm going to open my own shop. I had no idea what I was doing, and I did, and I started very small, and now I have my own practice, and I learn about anti-aging. But at least it's in line with my soul. I can sleep at peace with myself at night, versus I'm not pushed by the allopathic healthcare system to give poison to people.
100% agree. I want to take you over one more time real quick to your subtext, excuse me, Anna Mihalcea, MD, PhD.substack.com. Please go check her out there. Fantastic work. Tons of material. You're like us. You work around the clock, don't you?
Yes. Well, thanks so much for having me. And yeah.
Is that the best place to get you is on the Substack?
Absolutely. Yes, that is it. And people can subscribe and just get updates and just keep learning and keep sharing.
Great. We are here to educate about metabolic enslavement and how to reverse the neurobioweapon enslavement. That's what we are here doing. That's what Dr. Anna is here doing. For Dr. Anna Mihalcea, I am Dr. Jason Dean. This is Brave TV. Everybody, thank you so much for following. Go follow Dr. Anna. Let her educate you, and let's change the world. Take care.